I've noticed lately that there has been a rise in the amounts of video analyses of women starting to get back into reading. Analyses of BookTok, of BookTube, exposing the aesthetic of reading, the culture of books becoming popular with women again. So as a reader and an author, the thesis of this video is going to be that, respectfully, women enjoying books isn't something we need to analyze. So I'm going to run through some common critiques of BookTok culture and talk about my opinion on them, if I disagree with them or if I think there's any truth to them, especially from the lens of an author, because I think that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. I think one of the more common critiques of BookTok that I've seen recently is that it's a form of consumerism and that people buy a ton of books and that it's wasteful and that it's just another form of capitalism. So if I can express why this critique bothers me as an author already get paid so very little for their work. I mean, the amount of hours and years that go into creating a book is just so disproportional to how much we actually make from writing. To give you a frame of reference, if you're a fast writer, it might take you maybe 3 to 6 months to write a novel, the first draft, the first manuscript. And then usually you need to pay for editors. Developmental editing, line editing, copy editing. These usually cost several $1,000s each. Query literary agents, and then once you get a literary agent, tweak it even more based on the edits they want for you, and then try to get a book publishing deal through a traditional publishing house. Risk maybe not even getting a book publishing deal for it, or if you do get one, then you have to go through another round of edits again, and maybe then you get a sum of money up front, which for most debut authors is not more than $10,000. So already you are at a loss. Already you have spent years of your life and invested tens of thousands of dollars on the editing. Maybe you get a net surplus of a few $1,000s. My point is that authors already hardly make any money off of their writing compared to how much they've invested into their books. And you can say, oh, the evil publishing houses or the evil industry or the fact that we're wasting paper. If paper is the issue, then use ebooks. If big companies are your issue, buy from indie authors. I'm so grateful to places like BookTok for making books popular again, making reading popular again among particularly young women. Because that means that authors like myself have an audience. We have a place where we can market our books. We have people who are interested in what we're selling, something that if it were all just TV and video games, we absolutely would not have the ability to support ourselves. So I absolutely think the consumerism critique falls flat. Another common critique that I hear is that, well, it's become an aesthetic. It's so superficial. People just do it because they think hot girls read, or, that's just what their favorite influencer does. To that I say, who cares? So what if something is an aesthetic? My house has a certain aesthetic. My sense of style has a certain aesthetic. Certain aspects of our identities have an aesthetic. An aesthetic is just a visual representation of your likes, of your identity. There is nothing wrong with having an aesthetic. And if influencers or hot girls got you into reading, I think that's pretty good. I think there are a lot worse things that people can get you into than reading, which is known to be so good for our intellect and even our emotional well-being. People say, oh, well, everyone's falling under an aesthetic nowadays and they're not being authentic to their true selves. They're just hopping from identity to identity. People need help finding themselves sometimes. Not everybody knows who they are right off the bat. Sometimes people need to experiment a little bit. I didn't understand this criticism of the mob wife aesthetic either. Part of it was my frustration because I already have a lot of mob wife clothes. And so I was excited when this aesthetic came about, but then everybody was saying how superficial it is and how we need to have some originality. And I was sitting here thinking this is authentic to me, but I can't lean into it because I'm gonna get accused of copying or chasing a trend. The next counter argument I can sort of get behind. The next one is that certain books or certain tropes or trends get very popular and then the rest get left out. So I do agree that, romantasy is very big right now. There are certain books like Fourth Wing or A Court of Thorns and Roses. I don't know what the title actually is. I just see the acronym ACOTAR. There are definitely certain books that make it really, really big, and the rest just kind of get lost. There are trends that take off very, very quickly, and then indie authors, a lot of them will not receive the same level of attention because all the attention is on like these 10 books. I do think this is true, but I think it's kind of inevitable with anything that happens on the internet or just in a social group. There are going to be certain trends that just really take off. People do like to go for things that other people in their social circle also enjoy because they don't just want the product, they don't just want the book, they want the opportunity to bond with other people in their group. They want the opportunity to be a part of something, to feel like they belong. And I don't think that's that wrong. But that's not an issue with BookTok specifically. That's not an issue with reading culture specifically. That's an issue with any sort of social group. So criticizing one specific group for doing this thing seems a little bit nearsighted to me. It seems like not being able to see the forest for the trees. And the last counter argument that I've heard is that there's a lot of catty infighting. BookTok can be a very toxic place. There are a lot of people sort of coming at each other for having different tastes, just getting into feuds on this platform. And again, this one's kind of valid, but again, I just think about the same thing. It's not about reading. It's not about BookTok. It's not about this particular group of people. This will happen with any sort of social group. Political content creators, they get into feuds. Things get super toxic. Beauty influencers, things are toxic there. There are even people in the education space online that are toxic. It's people that are the problem. It's people that are the common denominator. It's not the fact that there's a culture of women reading. If there's a culture of women reading, there are going to be women who are perfectly kind and respectful in part of that group. And then there are going to be women who are less respectful and are going to try to stir the pot a little bit. That's just the way it goes. I've noticed that there's a trend among both men and women of criticizing anything that women do, any sort of hobby or interest that we've taken on as a collective. And men usually go the route of making fun of us for those interests, whereas women take the route of criticizing them by hyper-analyzing the ethics of it. I completely disagree with the way people have demonized the that girl trend. There are a ton of videos online too about how that girl trend is a scam and all this stuff. Women getting up early and doing healthy things is not a scam. Women setting an early alarm, journaling, having a healthy breakfast, working out, that does not affect your life whatsoever. Similarly, a woman enjoying books or trying to read as many books as she can in a year is not harmful to you. Let's be very clear. This is not something we need to analyze the ethics of. The other day, I got an email from somebody wanting my opinion on a trend called I'm Just a Girl. And it's not something that I'd heard a lot about, but the way that this email came to me was kind of framed as it's a new version of boys will be boys. And then when girls say they're having girl dinner, it promotes eating disorders. And I'm just can women not do anything without being criticized for it? From what I've seen, girl dinner is women making fun of, when they don't feel super hungry, just making maybe a mixture of things, a sort of charcuterie board. To go from somebody who's not feeling super hungry making a charcuterie board to this is disordered eating is such a big leap. It's not that deep all the time, y'all. It's not that deep. And if we're so concerned with ethics and the ethics of these phenomena, we also need to be aware that hyper-analyzing the ethics of every single interest women have is also going to harm people. It's actually going to harm women. It sends the message that anything women do is problematic, even reading. I wish there was a trend among young men of reading. I wish BookTok were big around men. Instead, we have, video games being the thing that men do, which I'm sorry, I know a lot of you guys aren't going to want to hear this, but video games are, in the scientific literature, much more clearly detrimental to people than reading books. The bottom line is, can we please just stop criticizing women for reading and stop criticizing women for every single interest that we have and hyper-analyzing the ethics of these cultures and these phenomena? Can we stop? Women are reading, they're supporting other authors, they're turning a good thing into an aesthetic. Just let women enjoy their books.